I think Kansas fans are freaking out a little bit because they see a guy commit here, a guy commit there. Kansas isn't going to go guns blazing. It's not like you're going to wake up 3 days from now and Kansas is going to have 4 guys. This is going to be a process.
Pay heed, all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. Of course, I'm here with Kevin Flaherty, and we're brought to you by Emprise Bank. We have a breaking news episode on this Thursday as we are recording. And unfortunately, it is not breaking news in the sense that Kansas has added a player to its basketball roster. It's the opposite, actually. Another player has entered into the transfer portal. Kevin, it's officially Storr over, or Storver. Storver. I was workshopping this a little bit before the show. Storver. Storr over. You get the idea. AJ Storr has entered the transfer portal for Kansas. A guy that came over from Wisconsin as a high-level scorer, and it didn't really pan out for him through much of the season. He was one of the players that was really expected to be one of the first guys probably to enter the portal just based off how things went this season. It didn't happen initially. Then there was this sort of brief moment of, wait a minute, if everybody else is gone, maybe AJ Storr just sticks around. And then, as it turns out, that's not the case. AJ Storr has entered into the transfer portal. We're going to talk a little bit about that, of course, and also Darryn Peterson. Want to talk a little bit about him as well. So one of the bright spots for Kansas right now, and some more names to watch in the transfer portal. So we're going to have you totally covered today for more transfer portal breaking news with AJ Storr. And of course, as always, if you haven't already, you should subscribe on our audio, Apple, Spotify, on YouTube. We are just over 650 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So thanks so much to everyone that has subscribed, but we want to keep going. We're dreaming bigger. We're dreaming bigger here on the show. So subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when more breaking news happens, because at this point, Kansas is going to have to add more players. So, we're going to have to be able to talk about them over the course of the coming weeks and months or so. So you'll definitely want to stay plugged in with us here on the show. And of course, if you haven't already, also be sure to check out some of our spring KU football position breakdown shows, talking about different positions. Just had a great one come out earlier, talking about the wide receiver position, a very exciting name that you may want to familiarize yourself with that we talked about on that show. Check that out as well. So, and you can go back and watch any of our previous position breakdown shows on our audio feed and our YouTube channel as well. So be sure to go check those out also. But today we are going to be talking about AJ Storr entering the transfer portal. Kevin, this is one that, again, I think everyone expected it. And then there was this sort of whiplash of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe not. And now, sure enough, here it is. AJ Storr enters in the transfer portal. What's your initial takeaway from this news?
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought he was going to be one of the first names in. And then when he wasn't, and a few days went by and everything else, it was like, well, maybe. Because you figured that he would be one of the first names, and ultimately it didn't wind up meaning anything. He's in the portal, and the biggest thing, Nick, we've talked about it, sort of ad nauseum, but you want to return some production, and I've given the stat before. No team since 1997 has won a national title without returning at least 3 players who started multiple games the previous year. Now, I do expect that trend to finish.
Hopefully it will change in 2025 and 2026, because we now know that Kansas absolutely does not have anybody returning from its previous roster.
Yeah, not 3 players who started multiple games the previous year. Kansas at this point, Nick, I believe is on track to return 0 minutes, from this past year. Interestingly enough, that 1997 stat could be broken actually in this year's Final Four. 3 of the teams do return 3 guys who started multiple games the previous year. Team that didn't, Duke. So not that you should be rooting for Duke, but that stat could change as of Monday night if that winds up happening. But even if you didn't fit the stat exactly right, you still want to bring back people who understand your culture, people who understand what's expected of them. Kansas, theoretically at least, is going to have some of those guys back with Elmarco Jackson, Jamari McDowell, provided all these guys do wind up sticking around. But for the most part, Nick, when you're talking about looking at, hey, this was the team in 2024, 2025, that's gone. And now you're booting up with an entirely new roster, basically, for this season. That has happened. You look at Kentucky, had to do pretty much a total rebuild. But when you see it like that, it happens with a coaching change usually. You don't usually have a Hall of Fame coach coming back who's been there for quite a while in Bill Self and still wind up hitting the reset button to this extent. And so while some people will say, oh, it's a nothing burger, oh, AJ Storr didn't live up to expectations, I do think, Nick, that there's at least part of me, I can just speak for myself, that's kind of like, well, man, you kind of wanted to return some people, and this isn't trending that way at all.
Yeah, this is a completely clean slate. As you mentioned it, absolutely 0 minutes, none, nil, nada minutes from the 2024-25 season, currently now on the roster. You mentioned with the guys returning. Marco Jackson didn't play the entire season due to injury. Jamari McDowell, redshirted. Noah Shelby, redshirted. And then you're bringing in 3 freshmen. That's your
Fuller was there. He redshirted. It's
yeah. I guess Tiller obviously joined at semester, but was coming off an injury, redshirted as well. And then so Tiller, Peterson, and Samus Calderon. But that's your team right there. That's your team that you currently have at the moment. So we are talking about a completely clean slate in this scenario, and we've mentioned it before. That just really amplifies the pressure that is put on this staff to build something, right? We're going to get him Darryn Peterson. That's kind of the bright spot, but setting him aside, like, you now are looking at a situation where you're going to be bringing in literally 8 probably new players, 8 guys out of the transfer portal. And my biggest concern go along with that, and that kind of partners with your point about generally wanting to have at least somebody back that understands your culture a little bit. On the flip side of that, with what KU is doing in this way, is you look at what KU has done. We've obviously spent a lot of time talking about over the course of the spring how the transfer portal, it's hit and miss. It's kind of a crapshoot sometimes. And this staff has certainly felt that as well over the past couple of years, some of the guys they've missed on. So now you're talking about bringing in 8 new guys. Well, what are the odds that you are going to hit on 6 of those guys? Or what are the odds that you're even going to hit on 4 of those guys? And when you start to look at it from that perspective, it becomes fairly alarming what this staff is attempting to do. They are basically flying blind in the dark, calling their shot that they can pull this off. And color me hesitant at this point. I don't know. I mean, as of right now, Kansas does not have any commits. I think it's pretty clear that they're kind of slow playing it a little bit at this point and kind of allowing things to develop. We'll get into some names maybe to keep an eye later on the show as well. But yeah, I consider me very hesitant right now of where things are at with going in the transfer portal based off of what we've seen. I mean, there's not a real blueprint for success going with this model, if you want to call it that, in terms of just cleaning house, and then trying to bring in basically a brand new starting lineup plus 2 or 3 more guys on top of that. So yeah, I am concerned at the moment, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Bill Self is maybe best at when running a program is breaking guys down and building them back up. And you don't have that timetable with transfers. And specifically when you're talking about 25, 26, you're not going to have that timetable to do that by the time March Madness rolls around. And I think that's the tricky thing about all of this. I think if it were me, it's very difficult, Nick, to look at how to approach anything from a multi-year standpoint, right? Because of the portal. But at the same time, I almost think that Kansas would be well served. Yeah, I'm not saying don't swing hard on 1 or 2 guys, but I would be looking at multiple year guys and really sell them on the multiple year commitment that they could be making of, hey, it's not just this year. We're going to build you up and put you on the best path for success over the next couple of years. And I really think that's probably their best path forward. I know a lot of people say, oh, KU's got money, just go out and outbid everybody. Everybody's got money now. I mean, when you look at revenue sharing, when you look at the TV money, LSU is throwing money at basketball now, despite having the football program that it has. Programs that haven't traditionally spent on basketball are spending money now and are real sort of risks to go up against in the portal era. And so it's not one of those things that you can just say, well, shoot, just pay $2 million a player and call it good. You know, for one thing, KU doesn't have that kind of money. I mean, nobody does. But the other thing is there's so much extra competition, Nick, for these guys that maybe you might not have had before. You know, if you're looking at a price tag 2 years ago, $2 million probably got you a star player, like somebody that was good, that you felt was going to carry your roster and probably carry it deep into March. Nick, some of the price tags that we're seeing now associated with these guys, whether it's rumor, innuendo, whatever, is you're paying $2 million now for potentially a number 3 or number 4 starter if they're really good at that position. And so I think Kansas is going to have to be very careful here, especially to your point with having to bring in 8 guys. If you start shelling out big payments for 1 guy or 2 guys, all of a sudden that bank account starts to dry up really quickly when you're trying to fill out the roster. And as we've seen the last few years with Kansas, depth is just as important as talent, and having the ability to sort of match up with different guys in different ways is going to be a key in this one too. And so I almost think, as great as it would be to go out and swing big on all kinds of guys, I almost think that, say, 5 of those transfers, maybe 4, I don't have the exact number, should be multi-year guys that you're really talking about. Hey, you're going to play a role this year. You have to. You have to play a role. But it's the sort of thing that you could play this role in 25, 26, and then come back and really have this be your team in 26, 27.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The dollar numbers are higher than they've ever been right now in terms of what players are looking for and in terms of what programs are willing to shell out in some situations as well. Also, so that's something to keep in mind. And again, like, if that's the market, that's the market, right? And players have a right to, if somebody's willing to pay, why wouldn't you demand, you know, the max that you think you can get? So it's sort of a cyclical, funny situation there where the market's so high, where it's players demanding, but then also programs have all this money that they're willing to shell out as well. So yeah, I think maybe that's the interesting thing that we've talked about over the course of since we started this show, and even going back to my days on Rock Chalk Sports Talk with you, Kevin, actually is talking about every year it feels like there's something to learn from the transfer portal. And Kansas, what have they learned? Well, I think you're seeing right now, one of the things, or one of the new approaches KU is taking in the portal this year, is they are not coming out the gates just unloading money left and right. They're being a bit more patient and tending a bit more towards evaluation, which has its pros and cons, like we've talked about. You know, one of the big cons is, in some cases, you have literally days, if not hours, to determine if you want to really have a guy. And if you balk for too long, he's gone. And then it's on to the next one. So, but there are pros to that, obviously, as well. Like, maybe now, hopefully this way, Kansas will get guys that they feel like can fit better together, and maybe that'll help them and over the course of the season going into 2025. So one piece that we do know that Kansas has to work with is a very, very special individual in Darryn Peterson. I want to talk a little bit more about him coming up on the other side of this break. But of course, that gives us right now an opportunity to tell you once again about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. You can shop Home Field Apparel at homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code PAYHEAT24. 15% off your first order gets you that discount with the promo code PAYHEAT24. You can find tons of Kansas gear, 140 other plus schools as well. They've got also, if you're a motorsports fan like I am, they've got some motorsports gear. You know, I'm actually, people may be surprised to know this, Kevin, but I really enjoy NASCAR. I'm a big NASCAR fan. I was a huge NASCAR kid when I was a kid. So they've got that. They've got F1 stuff as well. So they've got you covered in all different variety, not just college apparel as well. But use that promo code regardless of what you're getting with PAYHEAT24 for 15% off your first order. And we're back in just a moment. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Are you ready to win real money this March? Struggling to choose which team will pull off an upset? Well, forget all about the teams. All you need to focus on are player stats to rack up big cash prizes with DraftKings Pick 6. And when it comes to massive payouts, DraftKings dunks all over the competition. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. You can track your picks for a shot to win huge cash prizes. And it's really as simple as that, folks. You can turn your basketball knowledge into cash today. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just a $5 entry. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible member FDIC. If you have not already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You can follow us on Twitter at Paid KCSN. Lots of ways to stay connected with the show. And during this interesting time, I guess to say the least, in Kansas basketball and in Kansas football with spring football going on, you'll want to stay up to date by staying tuned into the show as always. So, as I teased before the break, the one bright spot right now, the one lone shining star of the situation for Kansas at the moment continues to be that they have what appears to me, Kevin, to be a top 2 pick in the 2026 NBA draft in the fold, and that is none other than Mr. Darryn Peterson. He continues to shine. For those that are maybe unaware, you'd actually get a chance to watch Darryn Peterson if you'd like over the course of the next couple days or so, playing at the high school national championships. But Darryn Peterson, Kevin, just continues to be a phenomenal player.
Yeah, you said top 2 pick. He might not be number 2. And I think when you look at what the NBA kind of covets in those bigger league guards who can not just score but also handle a creative burden for their teammates, that's who Darryn Peterson is. There aren't a lot of weaknesses there, Nick. Like, if you've watched Darryn Peterson, he played in Lawrence here recently, co-MVP of the McDonald's All-America game that happened earlier this week now in the national championships. You look at the whole thing, Nick, he's big, long, athletic for his position, very skilled, is a guy that can get where he wants on the court because of his athleticism, the way he handles the ball, passes the ball really well, and his instincts have come a long way as a passer. Probably, they said on the broadcast he was more scorer than shooter. The shot's not bad though, Nick. Like, it's pretty pure, and you have to also understand that a lot of the shots that he's taking at this level, it's not like it's a catch and shoot, in rhythm type stuff. He's having to shake off a guy or 3 in order to get that shot off. And so there's so many different things he does well. He rebounds really well. He had one putback dunk in the McDonald's game, actually had a second, but they called a foul on the initial shot, so it didn't wind up counting. Gets to the free throw line. He's a guy that takes pride defensively, all of those things. And I think when you look at him, Nick, it's not just that Kansas is getting a really good player. It's that Kansas has that to sell to guys in the transfer portal, and Kansas is definitely front facing with that. When you've looked at some of the interviews that people have done with some of these transfer targets, it's, oh yes, very much Kansas is like, hey, we've got maybe the number one pick in the country. That's going to be your point guard. And, that's something that's appealing to a lot of people, both because he's going to take some of the weight off of people, but also stylistically, right? This is a guy that's unselfish, that doesn't have issues creating for other people. You figure you're probably going to be pretty good if that's your point guard. And so Kansas has done a really nice job of sort of leading with by the way, if you come in, Darryn Peterson, and they should. I think that that's maybe the best thing that they have to sell at this point, maybe besides playing time with all the open roster spots.
Yeah, and a couple of quick notes from Darryn Peterson. He actually played a game today on Thursday as part of the national championship tournament that you alluded to. Damn near had a triple-double and also hit a very clutch three to put his team up. They were down 2 with about 6 seconds left. He hits a straightaway three that put him up. Eventually goes to overtime, but he helps carry them in overtime as well to get the win. So depending on when you're listening to this, he's going to be playing again on Friday. Darryn Peterson is, and you'll be able to watch. Look for Prolific Prep. That's the school that he plays for, the program that he plays for. It'll be on ESPN. I'm sure either ESPN or ESPN2, one of those. If you want to get a little early taste of the future in Lawrence. And yes, I think you hit on a couple of good points there about utilizing that as a selling point. I mean, Darryn Peterson, again, you mentioned it, might be the number 1 overall pick. And I tend to agree with that assessment right now, based off of just even the little bit that I have been able to see him as well. And so when you have a player like that, absolutely, that brings in tons of interest, tons of eyeballs are going to say, hey, I want to play with that guy, right? Like I want to have a chance to suit up next to him and go from there. Well, that's a big selling point also. I do want a little bit too, though, in the transfer portal, you often see guys who are looking for more playing time, more opportunities. You wonder if seeing a player like Darryn Peterson might turn some guys away, I guess, in some case. And maybe that might be the case in some situations. But regardless, I think Darryn Peterson is certainly, if you were to pick a building block, considering the circumstance that Kansas finds themselves in, if you were to pick a building block to sort of start on this trail to a brand new roster, Darryn Peterson's as good as it gets.
Yeah, if you're drafting players in college basketball for next season, he's probably a top 5 pick, maybe even higher than that, depending on who decides to come back. But if you're looking to build out a roster, like that's who you want for your number 1 pick, because not only is he a guy that's going to be very good, obviously plays a premium position too. How many times have we seen a team with a really good guard or maybe even a 4-man and their team isn't that great because one player, maybe struggles to impact the game enough. College basketball is one of those games that if your point guard is really, really good, you've got a chance to be really, really good, even if the pieces around him aren't perfect. I tend to think Kansas is going to do a pretty good job with those pieces. But to your point that you made earlier, Nick, and a point that we've made on several of these shows, I think Kansas fans are freaking out a little bit because they see a guy commit here, a guy commit there. Kansas isn't going to go guns blazing. It's not like you're going to wake up 3 days from now and Kansas is going to have 4 guys. This is going to be a process. And players are required to enter the portal by April 20th. Of course, if there's a coaching change, they have 30 days from the date of that coaching change to enter the portal. But that's not when they need to make their decision. So a guy who enters the portal, before April 20th, he can decide in August. I'm not saying he's going to, because these things tend to move a little bit quicker than that. I'm just saying don't worry about the fact that there aren't guys from the portal currently in this class. I would expect Kansas to maybe add a guy or two over the next week, and I think you're going to see them sort of start to find guys that are good fits, that can play with Peterson, and I think that it's going to be a process, kind of like we've said all along, Nick, where it's not going to be an immediate deal. You just kind of – I get that it's easy to be uneasy when you don't have guys on the roster, but this really is one of those things where it's, a wake me up in July type situation to see, what the roster is going to be like around him.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to panic when you look at the roster and you see 8 open spots. Like, I get it. I understand why you would maybe feel panicked right now. But yeah, I think you laid it out perfectly. There's a lot of time for more players to enter into the portal. You think about some of the bigger players that Kansas has gotten out of the portal. Hunter Dickinson was not a guy that committed until, I think, into May. If I'm not mistaken, when he chose Kansas. So we're talking still a month away at this point. If you're on that timeline, they've had multiple guys that it's been that situation going into even late May, right? And then you think about something else to consider is the NBA draft process, where guys can declare. You'll see it's happened many times before, where guys can declare for the NBA draft, and I think they have until the end of May to withdraw. So you're talking about another wave of players that are considered almost NBA caliber players that have until the end of May to determine whether or not they want to either reopen a college recruitment and come back or however they may decide to do that. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more movement within the transfer portal. So, you look at some schools that are getting a bunch of guys early, and that is certainly a strategy. You look at a school like Louisville, who already has landed 3 pretty big transfers within the past couple of days. You look at a school like Auburn, Michigan, some of these schools are moving quickly. And again, like I said earlier in the show, there's pros and cons to that. And I think for Kansas, because of the number of spots you have, and I really want to emphasize this, you can't afford to be aggressive on somebody and then have that guy not work out. I think if you're Kansas right now, like, you need to be getting players that you feel confident can fit in with what you're trying to do, because maybe, and unfortunately, this kind of maybe is what derailed Kansas' years the past couple of years, but maybe in the back of their minds, last couple of years, Bill Self was thinking, well, I've got Hunter Dickinson, I've got DeJuan Harris, I got KJ Adams, so I've got this really strong core of really quality players, I think. So I'm going to go be more aggressive and get an AJ Storr, who maybe doesn't totally fit in, and it's fine, because if it doesn't work out, we still have a really good core of players. Well, that didn't really work out, but the point being, now it's the opposite. You have nothing, right? I mean, we talked about Darryn Peterson, but beyond that, you don't have anything else to really fall back on as, hey, if we go out and get a guy in the transfer portal and it doesn't work out, we'll be fine because we have players X, Y, and Z. You don't have players X, Y, and Z. So every guy you get, you want to feel like he's going to positively impact. And obviously that's the case in any situation, but I think even more so in this scenario, it's amplified to the extreme that you want to go out and get players that you think can positively impact your roster and positively, step into a role and be successful with it.
Yeah, you can take a player who's a little bit more combustible when you have most of your roster already intact, where you can say, hey, if this guy hits, we win a national title. If he doesn't hit, maybe it's not the biggest disaster in the world. Kansas, I think, is in a spot right now, Nick, where if it winds up being the 7th or 8th guy as a combustible guy, that's maybe a little bit different. But as of right now, when Kansas is going through and having Zoom calls with these guys and trying to decide who to go after, you don't want a combustible guy to be one of your first few transfers in the portal. I'm not saying AJ Storr was combustible, but he was a guy that committed, I think, April 18th was when he did a year ago. So fairly early on in the process, and then it wound up not working out. I personally, Nick, and I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you're on the same page. I personally don't have any problem with Kansas vetting and going a little bit longer, given that they need these guys to work out to maybe a greater extent. And so I don't have any problem with them moving a little bit more slowly. And hey, if there's a guy that right now you've had a few conversations, you're like, that guy's a perfect fit, sure, move on him. But, as far as carrying a couple scholarships over or a few scholarships and taking your time with it a little bit more, people are going to get frustrated as, the transfer portal guy ranked number 3 overall goes somewhere, and the number 7 guy that maybe you were in on a little bit goes somewhere else. But ultimately, you may wind up with a guy who fits your program better and leads to more wins during the season. And that's more important than getting guys that rank atop the transfer list, because those things are done in a vacuum. It's just a straight up, this is the number 2 shooting guard in the portal. It's not, this is the number 2 shooting guard for Kansas. And so you really want to hone in on the guys that are going to work for you as a program. And that was something that this year maybe didn't quite happen as much. And you talk about learning lessons from the portal. Maybe that was a lesson that Kansas had to learn the hard way, and maybe something that Kansas is acting with a little bit more restraint right now because of the way that went in the past.
Let's get specific on some more names as we kind of look at, I guess, the portal big board, so to speak. We'll dive into a couple names to keep an eye on, some guys maybe that we like, and plenty more. We'll take one more quick break, and then we'll talk about that coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Okay, before we get into some names and kind of an update on that situation, one quick note about the transfer portal, and that is that right now, as we speak on April 3rd, we've started a recruiting dead period for the next week until April, or I guess a little over a week, until April 11th. It's recruiting dead period. If you're unfamiliar with that, essentially what that means in this situation is no coaches are allowed to go travel to visit players, and no players are allowed to visit campuses. So no in-person visits regardless during this dead period. You can, however, still conduct virtual visits. So you may see more schools and programs conduct Zoom calls and things like that with recruits, but no in-person visits for the next week until April 11th, I believe, is when that dead period ends. So you won't be seeing any visits from any players coming to Kansas over the next week because of that. So if you're wondering, why isn't Kansas getting any visitors? Well, that's why. And don't worry, it applies to everybody. So this is not just this is not just a Kansas dead period. This is everybody having a dead period. So just keep that in mind. Couple names to still keep an eye on in the transfer portal. We've talked about Josh Dix from Iowa. He is an interesting one, Kevin, in that he has completed a visit to Kansas and then has now completed other visits as well, including to Illinois. And typically in this era of the transfer portal, what we've seen historically is if you let a guy visit and then he doesn't commit, he's probably not going to commit. So that one's still kind of up in the air, I guess, for now. We'll see how things play out there.
Yeah, that's not 100% indicator, but it's pretty good. Like it's probably a 75% indicator. And I get that he was probably going to take his visits, but people will joke around, don't let this guy off campus without him committing. And that's the reason why, basically, is it's pretty easy to be human and like the school that you saw last, I think, is part of it. The other thing is, Nick, people in this business are very smart. And so coaches are able to hear, hey, this is what he liked, what he didn't like about his Kansas visit. This is an area where maybe we should focus more on. And so it's easier to tailor that. And when you strictly get into the money thing too, Nick, you also have a spot where you can say, okay, like this is their offer. Fine. We'll go above that. I think the thing that's tricky with Josh Dix too is without, knowing the exact figure, some people that I've talked to have said basically that the price point is going to be really, really high, basically the equivalent of what it might be for a star. And here's the thing I want to tell people about this. There's no bad guys in this, right? Like if Kansas has a backup player and he's getting offered $500,000 by somebody else, Kansas isn't bad for not wanting to pay that guy $500,000. Also, the kid isn't bad for wanting to go somewhere that wants to pay him $500,000 and values him at that point. But with Kansas having all these roster holes, Nick, I think it makes it extra tough to maybe swing on a guy like Josh Dix, who may be getting paid like a star player when if Kansas's roster worked out the way that they wanted it to with Flory sticking and with Peterson and everything, maybe he's your number 3 guy, and so I think it's tough to justify that. And I think you're going to see Kansas in some cases, I don't want to say walking away because I don't think Kansas would walk away from Dix, but I'm saying with other guys, you may see Kansas kind of walk away if they're just kind of like, we really like this guy. we just can't afford him at that price point for the role that he would play on this team.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, right? And I think you did a great job mentioning that that's not the player's fault if another school or if somebody wants to pay them that much money, right? Like, and you can't blame a guy for going out and getting that if there's somebody that values him at that point. And you're absolutely right. That's really kind of what it comes down to is, okay, what's the value, but what's the value to us? And for Kansas, that value could be quite a bit different than maybe some other programs that are looking for players like that. So something to keep in mind. So with Josh Dix, TBD, I guess, on that one. Another name to keep an eye on that's new into the portal is Trey White from Illinois, a 6'7" 4-man out of Illinois. But can stretch the floor a little bit. Didn't shoot a lot of threes, but did shoot a decent amount. Ended up shooting, I think, 33% from three while at Illinois. And you may be thinking to yourself, okay, well, Kansas, we're looking for somebody that can stretch the floor a little bit more, and 33% is not really that flashy. Like, okay, what are we doing here? Well, just put that in perspective. And this is nothing against KJ Adams.
Yeah.
He attempted 0 threes this past season. 0. You know what that percentage equates? 0. So a guy like Trey White, who could even just have the threat to step out, could help things out with Kansas offensively. He's somebody to keep an eye on, a player that plays really hard-nosed defense, was ranked pretty high up in defensive rating if you look at some of the other metric sites. So somebody that maybe could fit in a little bit better with Kansas as well at Illinois. He could be a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that fit, actually. And I thought your point was well made because people are like, why aren't they getting a guy shooting 40%, or when they look at a guy like Trey White? I would say a couple things. One, you make a really good point in that the forward doesn't necessarily have to shoot 40% if he can just occasionally be a guy that people have to respect when he steps behind the arc, because that's something that Kansas didn't have. I think Trey White can do some things that KJ Adams did in terms of being a multi-positional defender who's a good athlete, plays with toughness. He's a better rebounder than KJ Adams was. And so you're upgrading in a couple of key areas there if you wind up getting Trey White. The other thing that I would add to, though, Nick, is when people are projecting prospects to the next level, one of the things they look at when they ask, can a guy shoot? I mean, yeah, they look at the 3-point percentage. They also look at the free throw percentage, because a lot of times that can tell you if a guy has the shot that's able to, kind of detail, okay, this guy's got good form. He just needs to stretch it out a little bit. Trey White this year was a very good free throw shooter. I think 82%, right around there. And so potentially there's a little bit more outside shot to be tapped into there than he showed at Illinois this year. And so that's the other point that I would make. I'm not saying, hey, this guy's going to be unbelievable from three or whatever. I'm just saying don't necessarily look at it as 33% is the ceiling. I think with the shots he would be able to get playing that 4 spot, they'd probably be clean, in rhythm. And I think he has a chance to be a guy that could stretch the floor a little bit at the 4. And to your point, would certainly stretch the floor more as a 4 than what Kansas has had the last couple of years.
I still personally like RJ Lewis as well, Big East Player of the Year, but it doesn't seem like Kansas is really much in that one at this point. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. Some names to cross off the list. We'll start with Keyshawn Hall. You can cross him off. Keyshawn Hall has gone to Auburn. So thanks for nothing, Keyshawn Hall. Thanks for almost beating Kansas now in Fieldhouse, but not quite, even though he scored like 38,000 billion points. And I guess best of luck at Auburn to you.
Yeah, and had a whole bunch of points in the Big 12 tournament too, and Kansas won that one as well. So appreciate the 3 victories, and it would have been nice to see him next to Darryn Peterson, because I know a lot of people kind of questioned with Dent and now with Hall, like, hey, can these guys coexist with Peterson in terms of the ball needing to be in their hands? Yes, you can always have a number 2 guy or a second guy that's going to have the ball in his hands a whole lot. You had Frank Mason. You also had Devontae Graham and Perry Ellis one year. You also had Josh Jackson having the ball in his hands quite a bit the next year. And so you can have a second guy. I think where you start to get in trouble is when you get 3 or 4 of those guys. I would have liked to see Keyshawn Hall, obviously, and the Crimson and Blue think that he would have made for a really interesting fit. But at the same time, it's transfer portal season, and it's kind of you cross one off and it's on to the next.
Yep, exactly. Any other names that stood out to you, Kevin, of guys that maybe have already committed or guys that you think Kansas should have some interest in potentially? I'm going to put you on the spot here.
But I really wish Kansas would get in more. We mentioned him on a previous show on Yaxel Lindenborg because I think he's a guy that would be a tremendous fit with how skilled he is, with how well he passes the ball, with all the things that he can do. He's somebody that I would like to see Kansas get involved with. The issue there, along with the fact that, everybody is circling Lindenborg as a guy to get in on, is the fact that, to your point that you made earlier, he's somebody that's going to go through that NBA draft process. And he's somebody that, quite frankly, Nick, has a chance to sneak into the first round, get a guaranteed contract, and not come back to school. And so there is some risk involved with that. All the same, he's a guy that if I'm looking at the portal, I'm looking at guys like, oh man, I'd love for this guy to play with Darryn Peterson, at Kansas. He would be up either at or near the top of my list for sure.
Yeah. Another guy at the 4 position that looks really good. But Kansas also needs a 5, and they also need a 3, and they also need a 2, and they also need a bench. So many needs for Kansas at this point. But yeah, again, I would say my response to anybody who is on the ledge, I would say step off the ledge, understand that this is going to take a little bit of time probably, and that I think in some ways it's a positive that Kansas has not gone out and just grabbed the first 5-6 guys that they, to me, if that were the case, if that was what was unfolding, I would read that as Kansas panicking, as Kansas being like, oh crap, we don't have a team. Let's just go start grabbing guys and paying whatever and however it is. So I'm actually happy with this sort of measured approach that it seems like Kansas is taking right now. And you'll see more names enter. You'll see more of what, there's going to be so much more movement, I think, going over the course of the next couple of weeks. But there is a balance there, right? I think you highlighted it with the Lindenborg discussion where you don't want to get the runaround from a guy you think you can get and then find yourself at the end of May with no options, right?
Yeah.
So there is definitely that balance. And I'm sure that Kansas is moving as quickly as they want to move for certain players that they're after, but that there is definitely a balance there. So I would not panic yet. I am concerned, I would say at this point, but don't panic. No need to panic quite yet, I don't think. Because I think Kansas is moving, and I think you'll start to see some guys that Kansas really is interested in make their way to Lawrence, which is exciting to say the least, because they don't have a team right now. So, but that being said, Kevin, you got anything else to add here before we wrap up the show for today?
Touch grass, as the kids would say.
Yes, dude. Yes. Turn off the message boards. Don't refresh the message boards every 10 seconds. And yeah, maybe go out, go for a walk. Something, do no screen time for a little bit, and that'll brighten your day.
Yeah, for sure. Just knock it off for a little bit. You can come back. The transfer portal's still going to be there, and Kansas, it will still be filling out its roster by the time you get back with all those open spots. But no, I thought you played it perfectly. I'm in the same exact place as you are, where there's concern. There's not panic, I think, and I'm interested to see how Kansas does wind up sort of attacking these spots, because I do think we'll get a little bit more clarity. We'll get a guy or two maybe in the next couple weeks or so and have a little bit better understanding of where this roster is headed. But building out those 8 guys, it's going to take a little bit.
Yeah, if we're sitting here on May 3rd and Kansas is still looking at needing 6 guys or so, then yes, there will be some concern. But just give it a little bit of time, let the process play out a little bit, all that good stuff, and go from there. So
we'll title that episode "Pay Heed, Panic."
Yeah. You'll know when we're panicking, because the show will be titled panicking and Nick is on top of a very tall building and considering jumping. So you will know. You will know for sure once we have gone to panic mode. Not there yet, but regardless, you should stay subscribed so you know when we may go to panic mode or may not, and if Kansas gets more players. So subscribe on our audio platforms, Apple, Spotify. Leave us 5-star rating and review to share your thoughts. We'll talk about it on the show. We've had so many great comments on our YouTube channel, so really thank you so much to people that have commented there, and continue commenting, continue sharing your thoughts as well. So you can subscribe there. Also, tons of ways to stay in contact with the show. And of course, on our Twitter account. I mentioned it earlier also, we are doing a lot of KU football spring coverage as well. So we're doing spring position breakdowns over the course of spring. We've already done a number of them, so you can go check those out. We just did one recently with the wide receiver room. We did one on the offensive line, tight ends, as we kind of work through all the different position groups. We actually, on Thursday, we'll be shooting this episode soon enough, I'm sure, but we got to speak with one of Kevin's favorite position groups, and that's the defensive tackles. So you'll have probably about an hour and a half of Kevin gushing over the defensive tackles to look forward to in the near future when we record that episode.
Maybe like a 2 or 3 part episode or something. Each of them being 2 hours in length. I love the war daddies in the trenches, so it's I'll be excited for that one.
If you ever meet Kevin and you have like 3 hours to kill, just ask him about defensive tackles, and you'll be set there. So you have that to look forward to and plenty more. So, but until then, if there's any more breaking news, also you'll see it here from us as well on your feed. So that's why you got to stay subscribed. But until then, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.